Hello, I'm Bryan O'Neal from Coherent. On my screen, you can see that I have turned this Excel model, which is an insurance rater, a cyber insurance rater, into an API that is reachable at this endpoint where you pass in all of these inputs into the request and you get all of these outputs back in the response. Well, how do you govern this? And what I mean by governing it is how do you make changes to the model? How do you version it? How do you debug it? How do you test it? How do you promote it from a lower to higher environment, et cetera? All the kind of questions that you would ask of a traditional code base. And that's really what we're asking you to do here is think of Excel as source code. All right, so let's get into it. The first thing I want to show you is how to make a change. All right, so in the Coherent UI, we see this version overview section, and you see the version that I have uploaded already, version 0.1. Let's say we need to make a change to the model. All right, I'm going to open up our Excel model and directly make our change. Let's just make a change, a simple one to this static field for California base rate. I hit save. And all I have to do is drag and drop this the spreadsheet onto our existing service. And I'll leave a note here that says bump up California base rate. And you can see what it's doing here is compiling this version to code separately. And it's going to create a semantic minor version 0.2 such that all of the versions are independently callable. This new version is not going to deprecate the old version, so you can have multiple rate sets in production. And what's really striking about all this is that at no point did you need to submit a ticket to your tech team or wait for a backlog to clear or whatever. This is strictly the business users making the changes to their models as needed, purely in Excel. Okay, so now we see there's two versions of the cyber rater ready to go, all independently callable. Now, suppose my supervisor came along and wanted to know what did Bryan O'Neal just do to this cyber rater between versions 1 and 2. My supervisor would go click compare versions, and then Coherent is going to generate this nice visual diff of the two models where if I had added something, if I had added a new formula or something, it'd be green. If I had deleted something, it'd be red. If I had changed something, it'd be bright yellow. And then anything downstream of the change would be this lighter gold color. And so you quickly spot the change that I made. There's the change to the California base rate. And here's all the items downstream, all the calculations downstream that were impacted by that change. So you have this really nice audit trail over the lifetime of your model where you can really understand how the thing is evolving over time. All right, that's versioning. The next thing to discuss here is API call history. So if I come in here and hit submit a couple more times, we keep a log of every call that has been made to your API endpoint. So you can see here that I made a few of these 12 hours ago, and then a couple just now, and here's the calc time, here's the total time. I can come in and look at any one of these calls and observe the inputs and outputs as at that particular call. And I can even go in and rehydrate the Excel model itself with all of the inputs and outputs as at that call, which is fantastic for audit and compliance purposes. A very common use case is to actually save the call ID right here in your core system such that you can rehydrate that Excel workbook at a moment's notice in an audit or something like that. The next thing I'd like to point out is that all of these versions here are being done, are being iterated on freely in a lower environment. And we also give you higher environments here. So we would give you typically a dev and a UAT and a prod environment. And you only promote versions of the model that you've tested thoroughly, that are ready to go. You can integrate with your own CI/CD pipeline, et cetera. And of course, one of the things you'll want to do before you promote something is to test your model rigorously So let me show you the tools we give you for testing. All right, this is what we call our test bed feature. And I'm going to create a test bed where a test bed is a collection of test cases. All right, so I'm going to do 1,500 random test cases for this demo here. And by random, what I mean is that we're going to randomly choose a state from this cyber rater. We're going to randomly choose a gross revenue. We're going to randomly choose a hazard group, liability limit. And the way Coherent knows the allowed options for this, by the way, is that they were defined in Excel in data validation rules. So each of the inputs was protected by a data validation rule to define what the users are actually allowed to pass in to the API. Okay, so I'm going to generate these test cases. And again, these are going to be 1,500 random test cases. And the idea here is to use this as an initial smoke test of your model, let's say, like just to make sure that there's no extreme outliers, which, by the way, does happen a lot when people use this feature. They're kind of shocked by what their model produces under certain permutations. All right, so here's our 1,500 test cases. I'm going to hit Run Test Bed. And I'm going to run it against the newest version of the model after that California base rate change. And I want you to look at how fast these 1,500 test cases run. All right, this is a major virtue of not just our C++ compilation, but also the massively scalable back-end infrastructure of all of this. All right, so let me download the results and I'll show you what these test cases actually look like. It downloads to my browser. Let me pull it up here on the screen where you can see it a little easier. All right, I have 1,500 rows here. You can see where each row is a test case. And each test case has a state, a gross revenue, hazard group, liability limit, all of these inputs that we tagged as X inputs when we initially uploaded the model. So we are looking at all of the inputs going from left to right here. And then finally in the outputs, we can see our total premium and all the other outputs that we had originally tagged as X output at the beginning of our exercise here. And so the upshot of all this is we can use these test beds for an initial smoke test of our model to see if it's actually behaving the way we expect it to, and then to build a set of regression tests to test future versions of our model against to make sure they are behaving correctly. And then finally, one of the things you can do is create test beds that consist of your own in-force book. So you can download the template for these test beds for your particular model, add your in-force policies to it, and create a test bed out of that, which allows you to do the actuarial work of rate dislocation or on leveling and so forth. All right, so that's test beds for you. And at this point, we've covered a lot of governance steps. We talked about versioning, we talked about compare versions, we talked about API call history, testing center, promoting from lower environments to higher. The upshot of it all is that we want you to treat your Excel models as source code, and they need to be governed as such according to a proper software development lifecycle. Thank you very much for watching.